Good morning to you, even though it's evening here on the west coast of the United States. So I'm on the opposite side of the continent as Edward is. Anyway, I get to talk about a topic today that is really fun, and it's one of my favorites, and that has to do with academia and business collaboration, working together. You know from my background that I spent a number of years in business, in management, staff roles, and so business people are my people. So I like to spend time with them. They're interesting, they're fun, and okay, business is my hobby. That's what I like to work on. Anyway, so as a result, when I look at things like research, program development, teaching, and so forth, I try to tie it to businesses, to industry as best I can. And actually, I think that makes it more interesting for the students. I just love working with business managers, and I tell my students that business managers are, for the most part, very smart people, very hardworking, very eager to share their ideas with you. They love working with students, so that makes it a lot of fun as well. So I ask my students, I think in most of the classes I teach, that they are required to do some sort of an analysis project in a live business. So they leave the campus and they go into the business world and they talk to managers and look around, and I think for the most part they have a wonderful experience to get a whole different view of the concepts of business that we've been studying through the years. Anyway, with that in mind, what I'm going to talk about is collaboration. And there's a number of reasons that this is important, especially in today's climate of higher ed. What I did is as Edward mentioned, you go to the literature. So I looked around to see what had been published about business industry collaboration, and there's quite a bit. So if this interests you, you can go take a look at that. So I pulled some ideas from that. Then I realized that this whole idea of collaboration is a big amorphous topic. And so just to try to get my mind around it, I broke it into three somewhat distinct categories of the entire university collaborating with business or industry, basically collaboration at the project level, and then also collaboration at the individual researcher level. And these are somewhat arbitrary categories that I defined. We could maybe, if you look at this, you would come up with another one. But it was helpful for me in order to understand how we can go about understanding collaboration and what we can do to get the best possible results. So at the end, I'll kind of wrap up with some takeaways, some conclusions, and then maybe we have a little bit of time for discussion. Maybe not so much questions, but people have some ideas. By the way, my email address is at the beginning of this presentation. So if ideas come to you, please send me a message. And you never know, we may have an opportunity to work together. And oh, by the way, I've never been to India, and so maybe I need a good reason to come over to India and work with some of you and do an exciting project. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, let's start out with, I'm kind of have my notes on my own presentation here. Some of the basic concepts that I found in the literature and from my own experience. Basically, what we're talking about here is academia and industry and business working together on initiatives where both organizations can benefit. And I believe there's a lot of benefit for both academia and industry and working together. The literature points to opportunities, a lot of opportunities, and we'll talk about some of those and some examples, as well as significant challenges that can come up that you need to be aware of. I noticed that in the agenda that there's a presentation, I guess on day 4, bridging the gap between academic research and business practical needs. That sort of addresses some of this, so I won't go into this too deep now, because I think you're going to talk about it much more in a few days. But anyway, a lot of the problems come down to the pro theory versus the pro application mindsets of the two organizations. Academia is more pro theory, and industry is, yeah, theory's fine, but I need something that I can do now to improve my business. So getting those two to fit together can be a bit of a challenge. And the literature points to some things like intellectual property. Who owns the intellectual property that's developed? Obviously funding issues, right? We all know that money is always an issue when organizations try to work together. And I would say culture issues, and I've seen this just in my own careers. Academia and business do things differently. They work differently. The speed at which they do things is very, very different. So it's kind of a challenge to get everybody working, marching along together rather than going in different directions for different periods of time. And then also communication barriers. Even though we're all business, we do sometimes speak in different ways. So there's some challenges that have to be resolved in order to get collaboration to work properly. Also, and as well, and you probably can imagine this with any type of collaboration, you have to match needs and expectations of the two parties in order to have any kind of a relationship, or that they are not able to work together. Now, here's something that I saw in the literature that I thought was pertinent, so I put it on here. Collaboration tends to be more successful when the two organizations agree on the value of education and research. So both have to kind of agree on that. If the goals of the collaboration is based purely on business goals, then it tends to be less successful. So, and that does, restrict or limit who you're going to work with, in order to understand that you need to value education and research as well. As I said, as we move along, we can go to the next slide. I can give you some examples of collaboration. Oh, let's talk about benefits first. Why does business care about collaboration? Building knowledge and creating and refining ideas. Obviously, they're always looking for new ideas to stay ahead of the competition and be successful. Research could involve product development and testing. So there's some opportunities there that is of value to the business. Some businesses are very interested in publicity of their name and their brands and their products by attaching it to universities and research. Basically, it gets the word out. And then also, and I've run into this quite a bit in the recent few years, businesses are often looking for a pipeline of skilled potential employees. So they're looking for people with skills, and if they can find universities that have the appropriate coursework and discipline, then they are very interested in talking to these students and possibly hiring them for internships as well as for permanent employees when they graduate. I've seen that quite a bit. And now, why does academia care about working with business? Well, dollars, research funding. Business is often in a position to fund research, knowledge creation and refinement, right, for publications. So a lot of the ideas we talk about have to be applicable to business. Well, here's the business people that have the ideas and the problems and the questions. Also, and I'll give you some examples on this a little bit later, some academic programs use collaboration as a way to build the status of their program, to be more competitive in the marketplace, to attract students, attract faculty, attract research funding. And sometimes the appropriate collaboration can help with that. And then also, I mean, let's face it, student enrollment, retention, and completion of programs is critical to universities these days. And so they often can use collaboration as a tool to make that happen. Okay, so what I did after I looked at the literature, I kind of broke the idea of collaboration into three possible alternatives, if you will. One, as I said, is at the university business collaboration level. So these are the large formal agreements between academia and industry, developed and supported by senior managers of both organizations. Now, that's critical. These type of collaborations can probably not be done at the individual professor level. I can tell you a story about how I thought I could do that one time and I couldn't. So these are high-level partnerships, collaboration, and the senior executives of both organizations have to understand it and support it. Research shows that such agreements can be complex to build and nurture, and to keep the collaboration working together. However, such collaboration offers sometimes very important strategic benefits to both parties. For academia, the benefits are funding, reputation, research, ideas for academic programs. Now, here's some examples. These are here in the United States that I know of, that universities have collaborated with industry to build their own programs and their status with certain industry. Good example is Stanford University with the IT industry in California. New York University with the finance organizations of Wall Street in New York. Rice University in Texas with the oil and gas industry. Here in Oregon, where I am, we have the University of Oregon collaborating with Nike with their sports programs. And needless to say, the Nike logo is on all of the athletic uniforms, needless to say. Another one that I thought of after I wrote the slide that you probably are aware of is the University of Arkansas with their supply chain education. They partner with Walmart. And so that's a nice industry leader that you can attach your program to, learn from them, share ideas, and of course funding and so forth. So those are some of the examples to show you that that these type of partnerships, collaboration can be very, very important, but they can be tough to pull off. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Here's some examples of collaboration. Here's some examples, and I can give you an example also from my own experience of one of these. You see these around with major gifts to support university programs from business. You've probably seen those. You see universities that have business development centers that work with businesses in the community. You see some universities have incubators, seed funding to actually start up businesses. Again, these are formal programs to work with the business community. The one that I'm familiar with, and I can take a minute here and tell you about it, and that is the SAP University Alliance. Maybe you're familiar with SAP. That's a large software company based in Germany, and they specialize in enterprise business software. Well, SAP has a thing called University Alliances, and they've done this for 20 years. SAP puts quite a bit of resources and money into programs that allow universities, and I believe at the last count there's probably more than 1,000 universities around the world that belong to this alliance. And what they're able to do is use the SAP suite of software, which by the way is quite expensive, to use that in their programs, in their academic programs. SAP has people working on the project. They have curriculum that they've developed that you can download. We've done that, although we normally modify it to our own needs. Data sets and so forth. So, as well as SAP provides training for free. You have to, then they have those sites around the world where they do that. And you end up building colleagues that you know and can work with that kind of share this technology as well. So here, my personal story is I was working for a college near New York City, and we decided to do this SAP University Alliance. The way it works is you apply for the alliance. There's a formal process. You have to turn that in. Then once it's approved, then you are allowed to join. It doesn't cost very much. There's a small annual fee. It's not very expensive for the university to belong to this. And then you're able to, do training, begin using the software tools in your education, hands-on, to support be it accounting, or I used it for teaching production management. And so we began doing this. By the way, at that time, and maybe it's still that way, we were the only university in the New York City area that was teaching SAP. Why that is, I don't know. But we were the only game in town. So I was approached by, well, two different large companies. They found out that we were working with SAP, and these companies used the software to run their own operations. One was a large company that ran a number of hospitals in the New York City area. The other was a large food products company in New Jersey. And both of these organizations wanted to build collaboration with us. They were prepared to do funding of research. They wanted to offer internships, paid internships. They wanted to talk to our students about possibly hiring them when they graduate. They saw their experience with this tool tied to their business education is very, very valuable in the real world. In the case of the hospital company, I also thought that this could be a nice collaboration with our School of Nursing as well. So this sounded pretty exciting. And so I talked to the administration in our college, about these. And basically what happened is the college was not interested and did not want to pursue the collaboration. So that was disappointing, but in retrospect, I realized that the college did not have the money or the human resource manpower to apply to some sort of a collaboration like this to really make it work. Maybe it was a disappointment waiting to happen. So in retrospect, I believe the administration of the school made the right decision to not pursue that. But the point I want to make with you is that if you get involved in these business collaboration deals like SAP, and there's a number of other ones, all kinds of interesting ideas and opportunities can appear that could be very important and very valuable for your school. Anyway, so those are some examples of one that you see in industry, as well as an experience that I had. Now the question is, okay, these are high-level executive deals. What about me as the individual researcher? What am I going to do? How do I fit into this at all? The answer is, first, you may identify new opportunities. Just in your research work and working with business, you may come across opportunities, like in the case that I did. However, realize that you can't pull it off on your own, although you wish you could. You will have to work with senior administration to build and nurture the collaboration. And sometimes it fits with where the university is going. Other times it does not. So that's probably job one for all of us, is to keep our eyes and ears open for opportunities. And the second, and this is maybe even more important, if your university does have such collaboration in place today, where you're working with a certain industry, then there are probably excellent opportunities for research, possibly funded research. And of course, you have good research sites ready to go because you know that the businesses want to work with you. So it could really move things along for you a lot nicer if your interests are in the direction of where the collaboration that the school has with the industry. So that's kind of level one. Let's go to the next slide. And this is more at the project level. So we kind of come down a little bit in size. Typically, this involves certain research or development projects working with businesses. Involves industry support for research or academic initiatives. Typically, these are less complicated than the university deals that I talked about, but typically they do involve written agreements for funding, completion of work, products, use of technology tools, and so forth. Visible examples of this collaboration are research grants to projects and researchers. And in my time in academia, I've been fortunate to work on some funded research projects, and those are very interesting. One was funded by a large software company in the Netherlands. We worked on enterprise systems work, and the other was funded by a professional association of technology executives in the United States. So they funded the research. I worked with a couple of other students and with my professor. So we did the research, kind of followed much of what you saw in the prior discussion, and it resulted in, well, obviously working with these businesses and associations, which was fun. Also resulted in some papers being published and some book chapters. So that was productive for all of us. Actually, the idea it's really kind of funny how this research unfolds. The initial idea was that I would work on these funded research projects, and then that would become a lot of the topic for my dissertation. That was the plan. Well, things unfold in strange ways. I worked on the project, but I didn't use any of that material for my dissertation. I did something completely different, which is a whole nother story that we won't get into today. Research can take some strange turns. However, I learned a lot and enjoyed the research working with professional association and software company in Europe. Also, here's another angle on this that I've run into, that I've done some of this, and that's project business collaboration involving student projects, where students will work on projects with a business. I've heard of some cases where the students are paid to work on the project, perhaps software development or something, or they're not paid. Example of this that I've done is on a few occasions, we've got some projects going with local businesses. This was in Southern California. And we have a small team of students, and we went to the business and we met all the executives and we worked on a project, and it was part of the students' degree, part of their coursework was this project, a team project. And of course, we got to work with the business executives and then at the end present our results to them. So that was very interesting. I think it was a lot of fun for the students to actually go into the business world, meet managers, and then stand up in front of business executives and do a presentation on what you found. Sometimes the students are pretty frightened, but you know what? They did a great job, and it's probably a project that they'll remember, for a really, really long time. So that's some collaboration kind of at the working with business involving students. Here's another one that I've worked on is donations of technology and software to universities for research and teaching. As you know, my area is business technology. And so I spent a lot of time with those companies, mostly in Southern California, Silicon Valley, and so forth. And so I've made some connections. I think on maybe 3 or 4 occasions, I approached the company and said, how about if you don't donate your technology to the school? And they did. It was amazing. I was afraid to ask because I was afraid they'd turn me down. But one of them was a data warehousing tool. Actually, it was a rather expensive tool. And the vendor donated it to the school, and we used it for teaching. And again, here you go. Another dissertation was done using that technology, but it wasn't mine, So here we go again. Research takes a strange turn. A couple of other ones were data analytics tools that were donated, and we used those in some of our classes. And then one was project management software involving agile software development. And we used that in a class that I taught. So it was quite interesting to do a project and then use project management software to actually track where we are going. The students got to do that. Now, this whole idea of funding for research is kind of an important one. It's not required, but it certainly makes it a lot better if you can get some support. Maybe you don't get paid, but at least it pays your travel expenses and so forth. In a lot of universities, particularly larger ones, they have an Office of Grants and Funding. There may be such an office in your university, and they provide help for researchers to locate and win funding for research. The people in these offices get measured on how much money they bring into the university. That's what they're accountable for. So if you can talk to them and have a couple of good ideas, they love it. They're going to work on putting together grant proposals. They know where to shop a lot of those to get them accepted. And then it offers funding to support your research to move along, either with yourself, your colleagues. You could use some students and so forth. So I would, if your university has such an office, I would recommend that you check it out. You might find a nice avenue for funding to move you along with your dissertation or in your later research work. Okay, next page. Some examples. Again, I kind of give you US examples with software. Many software vendors provide products for research and teaching. Why do they do that? Well, first, if they just provide the software, it doesn't cost them anything really. They just give you a copy of it or give you some logons, and then you're able to use the software. And also, these uses of this software is strictly for research and teaching. It cannot be used for, industry. So obviously, if the university wants to use the tool to run the university, they have to pay for it themselves. But these are companies like Microsoft, Oracle, and Tableau are some, and there are others. You can often go to their website, and you'll see it typically often a formal academic university program out there. And sometimes you apply. These typically don't cost anything, and then you could be given permission to use their software. Could be very, very helpful for research. If you're, for example, some of the research I'm working on is business data analytics, in which case something like Tableau is a very expensive tool, widely used in business, and that would be a wonderful tool to use, to help my research. And same thing with Oracle and, of course, Microsoft. So we use those as well. I mentioned that I have had some software donated, and that's always very good to do, put it on your resume. So as I mentioned, you can go out online and look for these opportunities. But I think that a better way, or in addition to that, is personal contacts that you have with products. And we'll get into that later, is building your professional network of people that are in business that you know, and you can call them, you can visit them, and they can help you get going with technology. Or in the cases, the examples I mentioned earlier, they didn't have a university program. They'd never done that. And I can still remember going into this was up in San Jose area, into the office of the vice president of marketing of a software company. And I said, well, do you have a program where you provide free copies of your software for educational purposes? And he says to me, no, I spend all my day trying to figure out how to sell it and make money, and so, which is appropriate. However, when I talked to him about it, he went ahead and approved it. And so we were able to do that. Again, publicity, they want as many students as possible to be familiar with their tools, makes it easier to sell the tools. So, and I know of some cases where with that project management tool we used, I had students that were working in industry, and I know of some cases where they went to work and the manager says, hey, we need some tools for project management. And the student says, well, how about this one? And the vendor got to be able to make a sales call. They got a call to go in and try to sell their tool. So that's why business promotes this kind of thing. But it really helps if you can build a professional network of people that you can contact and get ideas. Okay, now once again, you understand this whole level of individual research project. Go back just a little bit. I want to hit one more bullet on this. Here, look at the bottom of this slide. What's the role of us as researchers with these type of business collaboration ideas? One good idea, and I've done this, is you work with established researchers and organizations on funded research projects. A lot of the funded projects go to the big names, the big name universities, the big name researchers. For example, my dissertation advisor was one of these people, and she could bring in money. So you can work with them, and it's funded research, and it really moves you along and helps them and makes the whole collaboration much more successful. As I mentioned, work with grant writers. There may be some at your university. You can check that out. Could be very helpful. And as I mentioned, ask vendors for their products if you can use them. Some of them had said, no, we don't know, we're not going to give it to you. Okay. But others said yes. I would say more said yes than said no. So that makes it pretty nice. And it's like with a lot of things in business, you build your own network. of professional contacts in industry, people that you can work with, that you can call. You're in a position to help them and they can help you. Okay? Moving along to the next slide. Kind of coming down the line here, we started, at the university level, and then we looked at the major research project level that maybe was students or funded research. The third level that I really thought about was the individual researcher and your personal collaboration with businesses. This tends to be a much narrower scope than the two that we've talked about. And typically, if you're working on a dissertation or working on other projects, excuse me, you'll probably come across the challenge of where am I going to go for my research sites to gather data for my specific project. That problem is going to come up eventually. So these are the kind of projects that they're at that level. Typically, these research projects tend to be rather informal. There's no funding or contracts typically that I've seen, although they may donate some technology. They might. But these tend to be much more informal. They're more of a person-to-person relationship of you with the business contact that you have. The research effort may or may not involve students, or it may just be you as the researcher. And the goal of business, now why would a business work with you on research? Typically the goal of the business is to support your research. They know you and they want to be helpful to help you. Also in exchange, they often want to exchange the copy of your research report or your paper. And why do they do this? They're looking for good ideas. They're hoping that in your paper you've got 2-3 good ideas that they can think about and maybe apply to their business. So that helps them a lot. In my experience, dissertation work tends to be of this type, where you have an individual researcher working with individuals in the business for collecting data and then giving them maybe a presentation, probably not a copy of your whole dissertation, but perhaps a paper that you wrote from it that's written for a business audience that they can use. Okay, next slide. I'm kind of following my own notes here. Good examples, as we talked about, of this kind of research are research sites where you can do interviews, surveys, experiments, observations, document analysis, depending upon the type of research that you were doing. The key thing here is finding businesses that have the appropriate operations or initiatives underway that match your research goals. The business may or may not be doing something that relates to your research, and you kind of figure that out as you get there. I'll give you an example of finding research sites was a challenge for me as I did my dissertation at Claremont. My dissertation used qualitative techniques. I did 13 case studies of different businesses, mostly in California, but in other parts of the US and in Canada. And so how do I go about finding people that will talk to me about their business operations? You're probably not going to be able to just call their number and talk to them. They won't tell you anything. So this had to be people that I knew or I could work with. Actually, I started out with 18 business contacts that said that they would talk to me, 18 different businesses, and I met with them. And 5 of them, they were fascinating businesses and they were wonderful people, but they were not doing the kind of work that matched my dissertation. Maybe I could use it for another project, but not my dissertation. So that left me with 13 of them. And then I worked with all of them and went through the case study protocol that you may have studied, and followed that methodology and was able to write my dissertation. So if you're looking for research sites, here's some ideas that have been helpful for me that I think you can get some mileage out of. Who do you contact? How do you go find these people that are going to let you into their business, share their ideas, let you do surveys or experiments or so forth? The best place to start is business colleagues and contacts. Some of these people that worked with me I knew from when I worked in industry. We were, fellow managers in a company. In one case, it was an individual who reported to me, so on my team. And so obviously you know these people. So when you call them, they're happy to talk to you and figure out what you're doing. And then they say, how can I be of help? So that's a good place to start, is your own colleagues and contacts. Now, the second bullet, now this was a really good one. Adjunct faculty who are with your university that are working in industry. As you know, most adjuncts have a day job, where they're working in business. Often they do. These are wonderful people to contact because they know you, and because they're adjunct faculty, they value education and they value research. So they're generally very interested in what you're doing. So a number of my sites were adjunct faculty, and I would talk to them on the phone, and they were in Los Angeles, they were in San Diego, and they were in a number of places, and I would go down there and schedule interviews, and they would tell me what they're doing, and I could gather all of my data for my case studies. So adjunct faculty is a really, really good one. If you don't know the adjunct faculty, in your university, it's really good to meet. They're fascinating people. They're good at teaching, and they're good in industry. They kind of do both, and they normally have a lot of ideas and a lot of experience that can really, really be helpful. Another one is former students. Not so much when they first graduate because they're at more entry level, but students as they move into management positions. By the way, I like to keep in touch with as many of my former students as possible. It's easier now with LinkedIn and Facebook and some tools like that. By the way, I have former students that are living and working on all continents, and I hear from them from time to time. So that's really, really fun to kind of watch their careers move along. So some of these former students, when they move into management positions, could open the door to research sites. I believe, I'm thinking one or maybe two of my 13 case studies were former students. And so it's fun to see how they're working and what they're doing. You go into them and they introduce you to other people in the organization, so you're able to gather a lot of data in a big, big hurry, which is really nice. Guest speakers at the university is another place. I think one or two of my cases were people that were speaking at Claremont, and I met them. They were in industry, and they were doing a presentation on some topic, in industry. And so I make sure I go up and talk to them. By the way, when you go to these kind of presentations, and I always do that, and there'll be someone from industry is speaking, at the end, they have like a little discussion thing. I always crowd my way to the front and meet the person and talk to them and make sure they know me, maybe give them my business card. These are wonderful contacts. Sometimes I invite them to be guest speakers in my classes, but they can be excellent sites for research, and you've met them. Now, recently, one thing that isn't very good, I've tried this, is just trying to do cold calls, where you just call a company and try to talk to somebody. Normally, they won't talk to you. They don't know who you are, and maybe you're working for their competitor. They don't know anything. Although I would say now with social media such as LinkedIn, it becomes a little better. I have made some contacts. For example, me speaking at this workshop right now, this was all done through LinkedIn. As I said, I've never been to India, although I have to do that. I need to come meet all you guys. But I would say with LinkedIn, there's some opportunities then to meet people, share some ideas, and in my particular case, Professor Gupta says, "Would you like to speak at a research workshop?" And I went, "Really? Me?" And she says, "Yeah, and so I says, "Let's do it." So this was all done by LinkedIn. So it just goes to show you that that's becoming an accepted way to meet people that can be very, very useful. Okay, next slide. I've been talking quite a while. Okay, what have we concluded based on our time together for the last little bit? Basically, academic business collaboration is a very broad term, involves many types of relationships. And we've talked about some of those, today. By the way, I would say that in the literature that I looked at, most of the literature talked about the university to industry collaboration at that first level, maybe involving university, government, and industry. Most of it is at that level. I saw less at the project level or at the individual level. There just didn't seem to be anything written. So that could be an area for research, if you think about it. This is an area where it's not well understood. We're sort of relying on people's success stories. We need to go beyond that. So that could be an area to work together if that interests you. Obviously, when you talk about collaboration, you need to somehow categorize it based on complexity, benefits, challenges, who needs to be involved in the collaboration, and we did some of that today. Focus on the needs of both parties. Needs and expectations have to meet. Otherwise, one or the other party is going to be disappointed, and it's not going to work. Like any human relationship, right? There has to be a meeting of needs and expectations. And as I mentioned, and this was from the literature, I thought was very good. Verify that both parties value research and education, not just business. We're all interested in business. We love it. Maybe it's our hobby, but we need to value research education, carefully manage the relationship, and then, as I mentioned, build one's network of professional colleagues. I tell my students that professional contacts are worth their weight in gold. They really are. They can be so helpful, I've had colleagues help me with projects, save me a lot of time and money, and I've helped them as well. And it's fun to keep in touch with your colleagues. You never know, and I've had colleagues offer me a job over the phone, you know what I'm saying? It's just a relationship that could be of benefit to both of you, so I invite you to nurture that. One thing I didn't put in the presentation that I'll kind of leave you with is a collaboration project that I'm working on right now, and frankly, I would say it's not going as well as I would like. And so maybe, and when we think about it, maybe you have some ideas on how to move this along better, but if so, maybe you could send me an email message and we could discuss it. Basically, a lot of my current work involves business data analytics, and that's a kind of a hot topic, as you know. There's a whole business decision-making side of it, and then, then there's the technology side, the data, and then the data mining and the visualization and the statistics side of it as well, which I find very, very interesting. So I'm working on some research projects plus building degree programs involving data analytics, undergraduate and master's level. Well, when I started out on this, what's the first thing you do? You read what you can, right? And then I contacted a person that I know, which she was a classmate of mine in the doctoral program at Claremont, and runs a data analytics program, a master's program at a university in Nevada. So I called her up and said, Dana, I'm trying to get into this. What's going on here? What do I need to know? And so she says, well, we need to talk. And I'll tell you what I had. By the way, you can use all my syllabi. You can use whatever I have, which was, very, very nice for her to offer to help me. Well, what I found out, and again, this is through professional contact, is that there's pretty good textbooks available. The publishers have come up with some pretty good material. The vendors, as we talked about, are very eager for you to use their software, Tableau, Microsoft, and so forth. So the tools are out there, little or no cost. But she told me the big problem you're going to have, and I'll tell you this right now, is where do you get the data to work on in the courses? Where do you get the data? You can read books and look at software, but you're going to have to do some analytics. You need data. And typically businesses are not very eager to give you their data, right? They consider it highly confidential. Even though I've called former students and they said, oh, I'd love to work with you, but we give our data to nobody. So I got nowhere. So I did find a few a few companies that said, yes, we'll cleanse the data, and you can use the data for your projects, for your research, and for your course assignments and projects. Well, great. Getting them to say that they would want to do that, narrowed it down to a few. But then the second problem occurred is they said, yes, I'll give you some data, but then they don't because they're too busy, right? Gathering the data and removing the confidential elements of it is a fair amount of work. And as you know, everybody in business is especially now, is extremely busy, right? Very busy. So this is a thing that they're going to get to later, but they never get to it. So as a result, I don't have much data. So maybe this is what my friend Dana told me was going to happen, is getting the data is going to be your big problem. Now, I could use random number generators and that kind of, I've done that before, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get some business data that has some really interesting stuff in it, that we can go in with data mining and visualization and find some good stuff. And by the way, share those findings with the business, right? These are businesses that are not real big, so they don't have a staff of data analytics people. So we could really help them out. So I'm kind of moving along. I would say the project is not going very fast. One of my companies that agreed to help us is in Mexico. And I says, maybe I just need to come down to Mexico and go into your office and gather the data myself. I'll just do it myself. And my contact says, sure, come down anytime. And, we can work together. That would be a lot of fun. So this is a project that goes to show you that people are very much supporting it, but it's hard to move it along because of the confidentiality and also of the work required to get it to go. And this is not the kind of data I can collect myself. I'm looking for sales data, production data, project data, things of that nature from their business that we can analyze. So that's an example of one that I'm working on, to give you an idea of the complexity. And also, if any of you have great ideas on how to move this along, or if you have contacts in India that would love to get involved in this, please let me know. And there may be an opportunity to work together. That's enough. I don't have much else to say. Are there any ideas, questions, comments? Was this helpful to get kind of an external view of research and course development? Sort of, the first presentation was more the inside view of how to do it. This is more the external of how do you work with business? How do you get the questions? How do you get people to help you? How do you get people that will sit down and talk to you for a couple of hours and explain to you what's going on, their challenges, and so forth? Introduce you to the president of the company, things like that. It's a whole nother skill set. And frankly, I find it the most fun because, as I said at the beginning, I'm a business guy. Business are my people. So I just enjoy spending time with them, and I learn so much in the research or just talking to business people. So I encourage you to go out in the business world and talk to people, and you'll be surprised. But I think that you'll find it enjoyable, and I believe it'll help your course development. It'll help your research if it's well grounded in the business world. That's my opinion.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. David.
Sure.
It was indeed very informative and very useful for all of us in order to make us understand the importance of industry-academia collaboration for all these stakeholders, may it be business, may it be academia, students, and then by the way, it will result into some very meaningful innovations also, which will result out of these collaborations. So thank you so much once again. With your permission, there are a few questions for discussion. So if you allow, I may take up those questions.
Okay, if there's something else I need to talk about.
Maybe the participants are a little more inquisitive to know from you. So I'll just take it up. So there's one question from Dr. Vinay, and he wanted to understand that how Oracle of Tableau is useful for management people to teach and conduct research, and is it useful to financial modeling, or can we run ARC model on this?
Financial modeling, yeah. This is sort of ties to the first presentation, which is research focused on finance. And I should have mentioned that to kind of tie to this, my background is very cross-functional. I don't know if you use that word in India. It's a buzzword over here. What it means is that because my career was technology, so I ended up working through the years with all kinds of different business areas: finance, accounting, human resources, engineering, production, all of the above. So I enjoy all aspects of business. So if we focus in on one, finance, obviously finance is an area that was an early user of technology, whereas I worked with marketing people and they were a little bit later. But yeah, there could be opportunities, particularly businesses that gather a lot of data, perhaps on financial markets. I'm thinking of lending companies, finance companies, maybe more so than an individual company, perhaps. But again, it's going to be the same issue that I mentioned. First, there's the relationship with the people in this company. And then second is them willing to share data, which financial data is probably confidential. By the way, here's another sidelight on that. It might be an area. People told me that government agencies, I don't know about in India, but certainly in the United States, they make a lot of data available to the public because the public paid for getting the data, right, with the tax dollars. So there's often a lot of data available, and that could be a good avenue for financial markets, is to see what the government has, the Ministry of Finance or Treasury or whatever it is. There may be some contacts there. Then obviously that's not confidential data because it's available to the public, but there could be some good data there on market performance, individual transactions, size, liquidity. I'm thinking of valuing of companies. So there could be a lot of data there, but it would require some digging. Either a company that gathers that kind of data, or the government that has some sort of a ministry that has a lot of that data, and then maybe could make it available to you for your research. That could be very good.
That's true, sir. In India also we have the organizations who provide, and we have the government departments that provide such kind of information and data. But I truly agree with you, that requires a commitment, a focus approach, and nevertheless a very good relationship building with the organization and people working out there. So that is truly required. So there is a next question from Dr. Manoj, and he wanted to understand that if you can name some of the eminent international agencies that particularly finance for research projects and collaborate with institutes. So
I'm not sure I understand the question. Some of the international organizations that deal with finance, is that the question?
That particularly finance the research project and collaborate with institutions. I
Yeah,
would understand the agencies which are available for collaboration with the institutes in terms of funding the research project.
Yeah, the government. Another one that I just thought about that might have a lot of financial related data that could be really useful would be the United Nations. They gather a lot of data. There could be some offices there that provide data, and you could collaborate with them, work with them, maybe analyze the data, do some data mining, do some modeling, whatever, and then share the results with them that they could find very useful with some of their programs. And that, of course, would be totally international. You could compare different countries, different market approaches, different financing tools that are used in different countries. That could be quite fascinating. So the United Nations, or maybe the World Bank, some of these organizations that cross boundaries, international boundaries, gather data. That could be actually quite exciting. Maybe I would want to work with you on that. Maybe using some of the tools that we have as well. That could be very good.
Right. That sounds definitely interesting. So one last question that could be from my side, that what are the key factors that make industry academia collaboration succeed? At times we have seen that, okay, collaboration has happened, but how do you make it succeed? What are
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. And again, it's going to depend upon the different levels that we talked about. The collaboration, I mean, let's use the example of University of Oregon, which is near where I am right now, with Nike, world headquarters, which is just a few miles from here. They do a lot of things together. Nike designs all their uniforms for their sports teams and all that, donates a lot of money. And the founder of Nike is a graduate of University of Oregon, so that's where that all came from. That's a collaboration that has to be constantly looked at and worked to make sure that both parties are getting the benefit that they're looking for. And if somebody's disappointed, they think that it's not working the way they want, then you have to talk about it and take action to make sure that someone's not getting left behind. Let me give you a story. I just read about this yesterday. One of these collaboration things that is not going very well, and that's another sportswear company called Under Armour. And they made, I think, a substantial deal with UCLA. Hundreds of millions of dollars. It was a huge amount of money that they gave to UCLA, and in exchange for that, they get publicity and various benefits, for their brand. Okay, that sounds a little bit like Nike in Oregon. Well, for whatever reason, and I don't know what went wrong, although I'm sure that it will be discussed, at length. Under Armour is very unhappy with UCLA to the point where they're suing them to get out of the agreement and void the contracts. So here you have a relationship where one of the parties is not only disappointed, but is angry and, is going to go to court. That's a terrible result for something that should be a wonderful collaboration. You know what I'm saying? So this is I don't know the specifics of this, but it's obviously something that has gone wrong over a period of time. And for whatever reason, the problems were not addressed to the point where one party is really angry. So I guess it depends on the deal you have. If the company is giving the university a lot of money in exchange for something they expect to happen, put their name on their medical school or whatever, then you have to follow through on that and stay in contact. And not only to keep the parties happy, but also to explore new ideas. The world's changing very quickly, and there could be new things that are coming up that one of the other parties thinks could be really, really good, and it needs to be discussed. It could open avenues for further collaboration to help both. So at the end of looking down more towards the individual level, if in your professional contacts, that you use to work with your research sites, you just have to stay in touch with these people. You can't just go there and gather data and then disappear and never come back. I mean, they're going to wonder what's going on here. So you have to follow up and show them what you're doing, because obviously you might want to use that site for further research, right?
Right.
They might even want to offer you a job. I mean, you never know. So make sure that and now with LinkedIn and email and texting and everything, it's a lot easier to keep in touch with people. How's it going? Maybe let's chat, or whatever. Here's what I'm working on. What are you doing? Your contact in industry may say, oh, we're having a big problem on this. It's like a big problem. Maybe you could help us. There could be a research project waiting to happen, right? So I would say just stay in touch, and the same thing with colleagues that you do research with. You stay in touch with them, include them in what you're doing, and plus it's just fun to keep in touch with people that you've worked with. You may not work with them again, or you might, but either way, that they're friends. They're friends of yours, and you keep in touch with them. So I view it very much as a human interaction. That's why I tell my students, business is a social endeavor. It's not like physics and astronomy. It's human, and it's people working together, and people have likes and dislikes and bias and fears, right? and that's